Welcome back to the Colander Medical Radio Show. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cronin, here talking with Dr. Brian Colander, board certified in internal medicine and specialist in artery disease, with offices in Bingham Farms and downtown Detroit. Dr. Colander is here with us discussing his concierge practice and how to avoid heart attack and stroke and how to begin the reversal of artery disease. Now, as we mentioned in the last segment, we've got a special guest here tonight, Doug Reynolds, founder of Bystander Response, and he's been explaining to us about how when there is a mass shooting or a traumatic event or people are bleeding out, how to actually stop the bleed and what we as citizens need to know in order to participate and learn how to actually help to stop the bleed, because that's what most of these people are dying of. He's very interested in getting tourniquets in everybody's backpack and everybody's car, and for everybody to take a class and learn about how to stop the bleed. Another issue we want to cover in this segment is that there has been a lot of coverage on cardiac incidents and having AEDs in malls and in stores and in restaurants so that we can have bystanders know how to work the AED. Dr. Colander, why don't you pick up and tell us a little bit about the AED?
Well, thanks, Anne-Marie. While we're talking about how it's very possible for people in the public, listeners out there, to save a life when they find somebody in trouble, not just having a serious bleed, but you're out in the mall, at the club, wherever, and you see someone go down, you do not need to be afraid to grab an AED, automated external defibrillator device, off the wall to use it. The instructions are made to be for anyone to follow. You just open up the box and follow the instructions. If someone is out, unconscious, laying down, you do not need to know anything more than to place the leads as directed by the simple instructions on the box, on the AED kit. And the machine will take over from there, and it will determine whether or not that person needs a shock to restart their heart. So this is just encouragement for everyone out there, if they come across a situation, to not feel that they're not qualified to perform this life-saving procedure. They can do it. The device is made to be done by someone who's never even seen the device before. So I'm going to encourage you to do that. In the meanwhile, let's get back to Doug. And I want to ask...
One thing before you slip onto that, I just want you to clarify. The AED, a question that's flying in my mind right now is, are all people that drop down and seem to have a cardiac incident, can they all be brought back by this? Is that for every kind of cardiac incident, or is it not used in certain situations? How would I know?
You don't need to know. If the person is out and unconscious, put the leads on. The machine's going to read their rhythm strip and determine if they have a rhythm that requires a shock. There's no way for anyone to know what their rhythm is. Just put the machine on and go and let the machine do its work. It's meant for lay people to use, and if the person has a rhythm, it's not going to give them a shock. So Doug, tell us about how you got involved in Bystander Response, please.
Thanks, Brian. It's important to understand the progression of Bystander Response, because it speaks to actually what Bystander Response is trying to accomplish, and that is for people to become aware of how to stop the bleed and to act accordingly when that situation comes up. In 2017, towards the end of it, after Pulse nightclub shooting, I decided that I was going to ensure that the police department in Farmington, where I live, had tourniquets. I went to them and they said, we have tourniquets, but they suggested I speak with a gentleman named Jamie Neufeld, who is the emergency manager for the city of Farmington Hills, and he at that time was trying to ensure that first responders in Oakland County all had a tourniquet. Jamie actually is a friend of mine that I've known for 20 years. We didn't realize that we were doing something in different rooms about the same thing. The synchronicity really is pretty amazing when it gets down to it. So he told me about Stop the Bleed, and I went to some classes with Beaumont Farmington Hills Hospital. That person that runs that, her name is Barbara Smith. She's the director of trauma care nursing for Beaumont Farmington Hills. And I decided that, well, okay, this is pretty good stuff. You know, I'm going to try to get the word out, and maybe I'm going to teach it. Well, I met some roadblocks, and it ended up that I had a discussion with some people in the Pentagon. I did a lot of research, and I found that Stop the Bleed initiative was conducive to pretty much a grassroots effort. It literally says that in the
outreach materials.
Yeah, the news brief that they put out regarding the Stop the Bleed initiative. So that went on, and then I also, another friend of mine that I know from when my kids were young, he's a baseball coach, his name's Jim Edson. Jim Edson is one of the foremost active shooter authorities in the country. He's very well known, he's very well respected, and he also came on board to help me work through what I needed to do with bystander response. Bystander response, its objective is, yeah, we can teach some classes. How many people are we going to teach? Really what we need to do, I think, is a lot of people can learn this, a lot of people can teach it. If you're comfortable with it, you can actually download how to teach it from the Stop the Bleed website from the federal government. You can do it, and there's a lot of things that happen that you have to be aware of. Physiologically, what happens if a person is involved in that situation, their body kind of shuts down. They have tunnel vision, their adrenaline flows, their extremity functions don't work that well. So it's a little bit complicated, but nonetheless, it's something that can easily be overcome if you have a little bit of knowledge. Some people just can't do it. I taught a class once, and there was a bunch of people in front of the table, and I said, okay, when people are bleeding, teenage girl passed out. All I said was the word bleeding. So some people are cut out for it, some people aren't. And then I opened up Bystander Response in 2018 as a nonprofit. Its purpose is to educate people and enable them and empower them to have the information they need, that in a situation where people are bleeding out, and again, 4 minutes, to assist them and maybe perhaps save a life. When you think about 20% of people dying from trauma-related injuries, then you think, okay, that's a lot of people.
So I have a question, Doug. What's, talk me through a class. I walk in here and Anne-Marie's bleeding out of her leg.
Right.
It's not a, just us, right, right. What do I do? What do I do?
Well, I like to start the classes, and right now, just as an aside, Bystander Response is also a part of the Southeast Michigan Stop the Bleed Coalition, which includes Farmington Public Safety, Farmington Hills, Police Department, Fire Department, Beaumont Health Systems, and the Emergency Preparedness Commission in Farmington Hills. So the class would start with, I like to make people aware of how quickly 4 minutes is. So, I might start my phone or, have a countdown to 4 minutes, and people are really quite surprised how quickly that goes. So what happens when people are bleeding out? There's certain things that have to occur. Number one is people have to be responsible for their personal safety. If they're in a situation where they can be compromised or injured, then they just add to the
right.
what's happening. They don't want to do that. Safety is first. They have to ensure your personal safety. Then you have to call 911. Now,
yes.
One of the bystander things that, if you think back, if you heard about bystander, there's the bystander effect where one person doesn't call somebody because they think somebody else is calling somebody.
Doug, I'm going to interrupt for a moment because we're going to have to cut to a break in a second, then pick
right.
back up on where to take people through this process.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll carry on with this. It's very interesting, but in the meantime, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to the Collender Medical Radio Show. You can reach Dr. Brian Collender by calling 248-737-0091. Again, that number is 248-737-0091. You're listening to the Collender Medical Radio Show on News Talk 760 WJR.